we'll be talking about cultivating community change makers with the power of stories. Here at LitWorld, we believe that humankind's greatest innovation is storytelling. When young people tap into strategies for owning and sharing their stories, they form their perspectives on the world and build the leadership skills urgently needed around the globe. Our session today will share our signature 7 strengths approach to exploring and experiencing reading, writing, speaking, listening, and creating, and leveraging these literacy skills to support children and families as local leaders and community change makers. I'm Dorothy Lee, and I'm LitWorld's Executive Director.
And I'm Amber Peterson, LitWorld's Director of Program Innovation.
We'll start by sharing a little bit more background about LitWorld. We are a global advocate for dynamic literacy and the power of sharing stories. I'm sure we're in great company today in that belief. We're a nonprofit. We work in partnership with organizations all over the world, currently in 20 different countries, working on this power of literacy and sharing stories. We work together to give children tools that will amplify their voices and build their agency. We all believe that everyone can change the world with their stories.
LitWorld's mission is to strengthen kids and communities through the power of stories. Our vision is a world that provides equitable and joyful access to education for children all over the world. And our purpose is to empower children to become global change makers and leaders through the provision of safe spaces to explore their own stories and express themselves.
Our approach comes in 3 parts. We've already touched on all of them. First of all, partnerships. We work on the ground with community-based organizations to activate, amplify, and connect them with one another and to grow their leadership skills. We build programs. We create them in intimate, small-scale settings and bring them across the country and around the world, both for children and for whole families. Stories are always the heartbeat of everything we do. We work to deepen the global understanding of the power of literacy and voice in achieving equity.
All of our work is grounded in what we call the LitWorld 7 Strengths Framework. The LitWorld 7 Strengths Framework surrounds these 7 ideas: belonging, friendship, kindness, curiosity, confidence, courage, and hope. We believe these are intrinsic to everybody in the world. They were developed in conversation with our partners across the globe. When we asked what makes a person well-rounded, successful, happy, it was these ideas that came up over and over. And so we embraced them and we made them the bedrock of all of the programs that we offer and all of the work that we do in the hopes that that emphasis on them creates strong and empowered young people.
Alongside those wonderful 7 strengths is the read aloud. Reading aloud is such an amazing tool and so often underrated, but it builds equity and promotes access. Not only does it build community around reading, but it also develops literacy skills. One of our favorite things about reading aloud is that it turns an action that's so often looked at as solitary and something that people only do when they're alone into something that builds community with a shared story, a shared text. In terms of the academic side, studies have shown that reading aloud to children is more effective for building their vocabulary than talking with them. It's the best way to help children develop word mastery and their grammar. Daily reading aloud has been shown to put children nearly a whole year ahead of children who do not do reading aloud every day, regardless of parental income, education level, or cultural background.
That's a powerful tool. So We know that book deserts are a significant barrier to literacy access for kids all over the world. LitWorld's 7 Strengths framework, with its emphasis on the read aloud, is an excellent tool for bolstering literacy access and building the capacity of young people as confident, engaged, and motivated leaders in their communities. So we'll take a moment now to look at why this access is important, as well as some tips and strategies for tapping into this accessible framework. So the very first of the 7 strengths is belonging, which we define as identifying as a valued, respected, and represented member of one's family, community, and the world as a whole. Literacy, as we know, can provide us with mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. In other words, it allows us to explore our own selves reflected on the page. It allows us to explore the globe through the experiences of other people, and it encourages us to constantly reshape our understanding of the world and our place in it. Some of the ways that we can cultivate belonging through literacy include embracing storytelling in all of its forms. Oral storytelling, theater, stories in the round, make storytelling fun and provide multiple access points for participants of all ages and all abilities. You can also make sure that you're creating access to diverse libraries that are both reflective and expansive. Make sure that you're providing both mirrors and windows. Be creative and discerning in the ways that you're creating your collections, and make sure that more than one perspective is being represented. And finally, encourage choice and voice in the storytelling and selection process. Encourage readers and listeners to form opinions about the types of stories that they like and dislike. Challenge them to continue to explore those opinions and their preferences, and always be shaping them.
I love the way you talked about both making sure it's fun and giving people agency, because if it's not fun, nobody wants to do it. There's sort of this idea that if it feels fun, it can't be good for you, but it's completely the opposite. If a kid doesn't want to be there, they don't want to be there. They're not going to let their brain be fully present.
Absolutely.
Or maybe not be physically present. They just won't show up because it won't be somewhere they want to be. So have to start with that belonging piece. Next, we'll talk about curiosity. For us, we define curiosity as fostering a willingness to explore new territories and test new theories. I just love curiosity. I can never get enough of it because I love to ask questions. Whether or not I worry about the answer, it's just so great to ask all the questions you can think of. Some ways that we can embrace curiosity when we're working with kids is thinking aloud when you read. When you do those read alouds, let the people listening know that you don't have all the answers. You're all learning together. Encourage exploration across genres. When you think about curiosity, you may first go to something that's maybe more scientific or fact-based, finding the answers. But sometimes poetry, that's the way you ask the deepest questions about the meaning of life and who we are and who we want to be. And definitely ask open-ended questions. It's amazing how hard that can be sometimes to think of when you automatically go towards a question that's about the plot or making a prediction. But see if you can remember to also ask questions that are big picture, that are open. What are you wondering about? What makes you curious every day?
One of my favorite definitions of that idea of an open-ended question was open-ended questions are questions that we don't already anticipate the answers for. I think especially when we're talking to young people, we often ask them questions already knowing what the answer is going to be. So those open-ended questions are a chance to have real conversations.
Absolutely. So often I find myself even with my daughter saying, or when she was younger too, what color is that? What is that? What is this? Maybe something like, what do you think is going to happen next? But it's so important to not be quizzing ourselves on things, but to actually be contemplating things together, being in that state of wonder.
The next of the 7 strengths is friendship, which we define as having close, trusting relationships with others. literacy can be such an amazing tool for connecting with others and exploring our own capacity as friends and as partners and as people who others rely on. Some of the ways that we can encourage friendship through literacy include creating story sharing networks. So providing ways for people to connect around literacy. So whether it's book clubs or finding some way of creating a book sharing network where people are exchanging books, whether it's having those book talks, virtual or in person, organic spaces for people to actually interact around literacy are such a way to encourage those friendships. Another way is to champion lit partnerships that are based on more than reading level. I think one of our instincts is to pair people who are reading similar books together. But when we expand beyond that, when we think about the ways that we access texts and the way that we tell stories across age levels, across ability levels, there's so much there that we can find to understand and learn and get from each other. And so these types of friendships that are based on real appreciation of story can be so amazing in helping to encourage friendships. Finally, observe and talk about the relationships that you encounter in stories, both the good ones and the bad ones. Stories can help us to learn how to connect with people in wonderful ways. There are so many beautiful examples of friendship. And there are also examples of what we don't want from the people that we connect with. And there's so much that we can learn from looking at the examples of what not to do or what we don't want as well.
This one is definitely speaking to me today, being in COVID times and not being able to see my friends in the same ways. It's important to have those book friends who you feel like you have a relationship with as you read that text and live in that world of the book, and how that can be a reminder to actually go ahead and reach out and stay connected as well. And it's going to be so important as more and more kids are able to be together in person who maybe haven't been in this past year. It's going to take a lot of work. Friendship takes work. It's not
so true.
Well, very closely connected to that, the next strength is kindness, which we think about as being tender towards others in the world who are in need, both near and far. Another thing we've been thinking about a lot this past year, for sure. I mean, we think about all the 7 strengths all the time. That's one of the things that's great about them, but definitely standing out to me today. Literacy provides us with the opportunity to learn empathy from the text that we're reading. Studies have shown that reading fiction is the best way to cultivate empathy because we get to see it on the page first and then practice that in our real interactions with other people. It helps us know how to support others when they're struggling. And it can help us create a culture where challenges are celebrated as learning opportunities. Some ways that you can help build kindness are modeling, celebrating other people's strengths as readers, as speakers, as listeners, as creators of all kinds. You can also share the value of close listening and really respecting what others are contributing to a conversation on whatever size or at whatever volume. You can also use quick bursts of writing, such as stop and jot, to help listeners and readers lean into one another's responses and not just think about their own perspective. I'm not hearing you, Amber.
Kindness is one of my favorite of the 7 strengths. Apologies. I think mostly because it's sometimes it's underestimated how difficult kindness can be. And so literacy provides a great way of exploring kindness, of really thinking about what it means to be kind, not just to other people, but to yourself as well. So I love kindness. Moving on to the next one. The next of the 7 strengths is confidence, which we define as thinking independently and expressing ideas with assurance. Literacy provides us with opportunities to explore the entire world, to find ideas, and to bolster our own understanding and competence about how things work. So, some of the things that we can do to boost confidence. Use varying levels of texts. Sometimes being able to sit in front of a text that's harder or maybe not so hard for you can help you to have a different relationship with it. There's so much that we can learn from interacting with texts that aren't necessarily on our levels. And I think sometimes when we think about providing kids with texts, we always try to be very matchy with that. We can ensure that participants have safe spaces to share their unique voices and their responses, both live and virtual. So make sure that we're creating spaces to have conversations and to share all of those different perspectives that we come to those conversations with. And finally, practice. Practice performance-based read-alouds, practice sharing your voice, practice sharing your ideas. The more we practice, the better we get at it and the more comfortable we come with doing it.
It's so important to remember how different confidence can look in different people too. That being said, it is often more visible than some of the other strengths. It's often something that we hear about from Lit Club or Lit Camp leaders as something that they notice. Oh, her confidence increased so much because she was so shy at the beginning, and now she's speaking up and sharing her opinions and her ideas. Of course, all the other strengths are baked into that. She wouldn't be doing that if she didn't feel that sense of belonging and feel like she was receiving kindness from her peers first. But confidence can be a little more easily seen and measured, which is really helpful as long as we remember that it doesn't look the same for everybody. The performance is not the same for everybody.
Absolutely.
I'll jump us over to courage. The strength to try new things or do something that you know is right, even when it may be difficult. Again, literacy can provide us with such great examples of courage that we can be inspired by. Some ways that you can explore courage with your kids or adults. You can read aloud from speeches and biographies from inspiring people in our history. That can be an incredible way to feel inspired, as long as you don't feel too intimidated, because not all courage means giving a big speech. And in this last bullet point here, those quiet courage moments, they're equally important. So making sure that you have a balance of both. To make sure, again, to Amber's earlier point about the mirrors, the windows, the sliding glass doors, that the shyer kids, the quieter kids see themselves reflected in courage, as well as the kids who may be more ready to jump up on stage and wave a flag. You can also model bravery, again, in all those scales and sizes. Lead by example. And as we were talking about earlier too, make it clear that you're a learner also. You can show your own vulnerability. That can mean so much to kids. And it's often harder for us adults. I know that it can be hard for me to do that with my daughter. And we've seen it in many of our family programs, that the kids are so ready to learn and to ask questions and don't mind doing that. But often the adults feel like they need to pretend that they already know everything. So we can follow in the kids' footsteps with that oftentimes.
I love that. Such a great point. The final of the 7 strengths is hope. And it's really kind of a cumulative one. It's kind of the collection of all of those 7 strengths together. We define it as thinking optimistically and believing that today's efforts will produce good things in the future for yourself and for the world. Literacy can open up the whole world for young people, and books are a launch pad. The skills and the lessons that we learn from stories can help us to become better people and better global citizens. And it's not just for kids either, it's for everyone. So ways to celebrate hope. Build a hope read aloud collection that you can turn to during difficult times. Hope read alouds come in handy during times of distress or when kids need help framing a tragedy or current events. Read alouds of hope themed books were so important this past year as we dealt with the global pandemic. It's something that we heard over and over from our communities all over the world. Hope can really be that light for us when we need it. Set ambitious but achievable goals together as a reading community. Engage everybody in creating those goals and make sure that there's some stakes for everyone in actually achieving them. Finally, help young people see themselves as part of the larger world through literacy. We've said several times that, books can be mirrors, windows, sliding glass doors, and I think it's never more important than when you're thinking about hope and the access that you have to an entire globe of experiences and perspectives. And so it's really just about claiming it and using it.
So as we think about the journey of the 7 strengths and the way that we take ourselves as readers through texts that we're engaging with, or listeners, and through our own self-exploration and our own writing and story sharing, we also think about this idea first of the self, that literacy is a tool for examining and exploring ourselves and asking what is our place in the world and exploring what that answer might be. You can find ways to create those spaces for genuine and organic discovery, and make sure you prioritize the protection of those safe spaces for yourself and for the people you're working with, the kids you're working with. You can be creative in providing access and time for reflection so that you're not only getting to choose the books that you're reading or listening to, you're also listening to other people's choices, and you're reflecting on that both internally and in writing as well, sharing your own story. How does your experience relate to what you're hearing about or reading about? Then we can turn that to the community. Literacy can invite us to discover our own power as change makers. We can use literacy to help shape our understanding of our own communities, which may be our local communities and maybe other communities as well, and to claim that power to shape and change those communities. Text can also promote community for us, as we talked about earlier, by reading aloud, by exchanging your own stories or books that mean something to you, and by normalizing conversation and reflection through text. Next, that takes us to the world. Literacy is a window to the world, as we've been touching on so far today. Make sure that the stories you share and are experiencing are not limited by your own community, the perspective that you already have, the experiences that you've had personally. And you can turn your own self-discovery and community work into thinking about how you might change and shape the world as well, and engage with the world as a whole.
LitWorld's work is really centered in providing these spaces for this connection to self, to community, and to world through literacy for everyone everywhere. Stories are important, and owning the telling of those stories is essential for communities as they demand equity and as they demand visibility on a global stage. Our programs and our pedagogy aims to erase the idea of book deserts by amplifying, honoring, and embracing stories that exist in all forms, and finding ways to make story sharing possible in every community and across all levels of accessibility.
Well, as we've been talking about all throughout this presentation, LitWorld doesn't do anything in isolation. It's all about collaboration and partnerships. So we invite you to join in this work with us. First off, We created World Read Aloud Day back in 2010, and it has become a global phenomenon. Many of you may already participate in the day. We're so glad to have you with us. And if you don't, we hope you'll join us on February 2nd, 2022. World Read Aloud Day is the first Wednesday of every February, and next year will be 2-2-2-2. We're very excited about it. Every year, celebrations happen in over 100 countries all across the globe. And our social media campaign reaches hundreds of millions every year. You can celebrate with your organizations, your schools, your community, your family, and we hope you'll lend your voice to this powerful movement.
We also hope that you'll connect with each other. We know that the work of ending book deserts and promoting literacy requires us all to work together. So in the spirit of LitWorld, we encourage you to exchange ideas with others in your community, with other organizations, to empower individuals, to build capacity, and to aid in this creation of a powerful international network, which is what we need to change the world.
Absolutely. We hope that you'll be in touch with us. Feel free to connect in any way, shape, or form. You can visit our website. You can find us on social media. You can email us here at these addresses on the screen. We're, again, so grateful to be part of this inaugural End Book Deserts event. Sorry we didn't get to see you in person last year, but we're glad to be with you virtually this year. And we look forward to talking more.
Thank you so much.